Now I want to address one comment because there's still plenty of us to talk about, but we do have a hard out here at 10 o'clock. So for those of you joining us, we're going to be doing these podcasts. Actually, we might have a guest next week. So we've got lots to talk about, especially in terms of the channel and how we continue to move forward. But Alishon says, I miss you guys, and I'm glad to see you back online today. Super excited to hear Brian's plans. And so if you guys have not seen, I would encourage you to check out the last vlog video that I posted. It's a very good and important watch, and I think it kind of really helps answer a lot of the core questions, but also gives a reasonable timetable for my return, because there is no bigger invitation back to this game than having it come to Xbox. I've already had other friends that are Xbox only. They're like, dude, let me know when you're playing. However, I'm still working on my health goals, and I still have that 210 weight goal to hit before you start really seeing me, return into a big force of gaming. But check out the video. I go into full detail over it. I'd encourage you to do so. If you like the video, be sure to like and all that good stuff, because that's a great way of helping out on the algorithm. Some of the culties have found it, and they're a constant source of entertainment for me. And so that is, I just want to address that. And the link is, just check the homepage. You'll see the video going over the full detail of it there. But what do you want to talk about next, dude? Because there's still we're going to the new world.
Yeah, so actual content itself. So 6.5, there was nothing that surprised me outside of the Fall Guys collab. Couldn't have seen that coming. Everything else about 6.5 and 6.55 seems to line up with the roadmap from February of 22, when they laid out what this expansion would have in it. It's all right where we thought it would be. Obviously, we didn't have the details of what the dungeon name would be and what the variant location would be and things like that. So those are surprises, but they're not wildly groundbreaking surprises. It's just more detail than we had before. Mm-hmm. So I think to finish out the expansion, unless there's something after 6.55, which there's never been anything, 6.58 is unlocking the Savage tier, the loot and stuff. So there's some little things that aren't in there, but nothing crazy. 7.0 news, however, there was some pretty big stuff in there. Some of it's just little changes and expansions on systems that we kind of expect from one expansion to the next, and so they're surprising, but there's always going to be X number of surprises. Mm-hmm. But the 2 die slots was well received by the Glamour community, and the Glamour community is always in full force at FanFest, and so it always gets a really loud cheer, probably the loudest cheer all weekend,
and the
maybe outside the primals. But even people who just want the game to get better and run better, that marks a huge transformation. That paired with the other thing that didn't get as much of a response, because I think people didn't quite understand what it is. When they said optional items, I take those as store items, will be storeable in the armoire. So for anybody that does have a full Glamour dresser, keeps Glamour on their retainers as well, those are probably the same types of players that it's not wildly uncommon for them to have some store MOG. And so when they have some store Glamour items, those will now be in the armoire, which is in unlimited storage. And that's the first step too. I would love to see AF sets go in there. I think that would be a huge marked trend. Right now, the only AF set that goes in there is the level 45 set, because it's not reacquirable, but all your poetic sets don't. And I'd love to see those go. All your poetic sets and your AF sets. I'd love to see all your class related stuff and your poetic sets go into the armoire. Personally, and then just selfish me, I would love there to be achievements for filling out your armoire. Let's turn it into a collection system, just like the Orchestran system, where you've got a log and you can check things off.
I feel like that's where this is going to go, because what I said about the die system, and for anybody who's been following us any period of time knows that I'm not a Glamour guy. Fashion and all that stuff isn't what speaks to me, but I know how important it is. But the engineer in me goes, oh my gosh, they are really working on the memory management in the back end. That change just before when they removed slots, hey, we're taking this out. People were like, huh? I was like, yeah, they're out of memory. They have hit a wall, and they're going to have to go figure that out. And that's what I was like, oh my gosh, they have been working on that engine, that back end, the memory thing, which is really exciting to see. Obviously the graphical update is a visual representation that people can see and feel more so, but it's actually the dying system that they've talked about right there, that I was like, oh, that's actually I think the biggest, people like it for this. And I'm like, oh man, the back end of itself, that's going to make so much more, that's going to pay out year over year over year as they continue to refine and work on that system, into the future. So I was actually like pretty excited about that.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Pretty game changing that they could make that happen. And hopefully that's a chance for them to go back and remake the way gear is handled. There's some really clumsy things that have just like lingered about the way gear is made. And so like for anybody that doesn't understand why they don't just double the size of the glamour dresser and why they don't it's not as dumb as why Diablo 4 screwed up the stash tab, which is that every time you see a player in the world, it loads that player in all of their stash tab. Like if you can imagine, every time you got into Alliance raid, it pulled that player's like all their retainers, inventory, and everything. That's just a wild level. I don't know. There was probably a reason for it, and they just didn't think about the cost. And so it's nothing like that. In Final Fantasy XIV, they really were focused on your gear is yours. And that sounds like a good goal. And what that means is when you put something into your retainer, when you put something into your glamour dresser, it's that exact piece of gear. I've got a smoothie here from Smoothie King, and it's this exact smoothie. And it's not just filled to the same amount with the same thing. It's literally this exact smoothie.
Yeah.
It's the exact same peanut butter. It's the exact same bananas. It's exactly this smoothie. And the downside of that is that means that if you go pull a piece out of your glamour dresser that you put in 2 years ago, it has to pull the exact one out, as opposed to your orchestron list is a checklist. Have, don't have. And it's just a list. And every time you right click on one of those scrolls, it just toggles your list from being a no to being a yes. And then you never pull it back out. You don't have to get back to that exact roll again. So from a data management standpoint, the orchestron system allows you to store a theoretically infinite number of orchestrons relative to the glamour dresser, where it's a physical space. It's like a suitcase. Like it can only be so big, and they have to make the suitcase bigger each time they expand your glamour dresser, instead of just having a list of all the items in the game and saying you've collected this one and you haven't. Now, what that's allowed them to do is that would theoretically, if they wanted to, allow it to track your repair, though I think it makes you repair before you deposit. It does allow it to track things like, if they wanted to, like you could track things like Spirit Bond, you could track melded materia, you could track dye that was on the gear when it was inserted. And so one of the ways of kind of saving yourself money is you can like dye gear prior to inserting it, and then that way when you put it on different sets, it's always dyed. Because it's your piece, and if you ever pull it out, it'll tell you who crafted it. So if you crafted it, it'll still have your name on it. And those things would all be lost if it moved to being an orchestron system. But in trade, it would work much closer to Guild Wars or World of Warcraft system, where you could collect every single appearance in the game. And so like the armoire is where I'd like to see things go, because the armoire, once it goes, like you can store everything in there. You can store like your seasonals in there. You can store anything that's like if something is not obtainable, it can probably go into the armoire. And so in my mind, you would take the Calamity Salvager, which is how you go back and get anything that you can reacquire. So that's where you get like Garo sets, job quest sets, so there's a bunch of stuff in your Calamity Salvager, and you would take the armoire and you would combine those.
Yeah.
And that would be the first major step. And then it would be, okay, how do we get more things from Glamour into that new system? And then just slowly, one step at a time, say, hey, we're going to pull everything from 8.0 forward. We'll all be in that system. And then do what they did with duty support. And we'll go, and we're going to support 2.0. And in 8.1, we'll do 3.0. And in 8.2, we'll do 4.0. And if we get to a particular expansion, they go, hey, for some reason, Scala couldn't go in there. Fine. But let's try to capture 85% of the game or more and get it into a system where we can actually hold on to it.
I think these changes that they are making, just like Nevylink says that they need to fix the friends list. Yoshi P's actually called that out, I think, on his own, that's something that is on the plans for them to do, especially like with how that's managed. Go ahead.
Correction. Nevik says you do lose who crafts it when you stick it in the dresser.
Right.
That's weird.
The armoire.
Weird. Oh, in the armoire. In the armoire or the dresser?
Maybe the dresser. Like
in the armoire, you can't store dye. The armoire strips it. It becomes like an orchestron. The armoire's gone.
Yeah, the armoire. I always
which is where I
like,
prefer it to go. I would store things in the armoire every day.
I wonder. I really always. The engineer in me always is like, what's really happening behind the scenes? What's really happening behind the scenes now? Diego asks, hey guys, what about Final Fantasy XI? And I think that's what I've said. I was like, the thing that could have only just made Phil Spencer coming out on stage even more wild is that he's like, yep, we're bringing Final Fantasy 11 back to the Xbox console. Yoshi P's talked about Final Fantasy 11, and I think and I hope that they end up going this direction. But when you think about cloud gaming, and again, for as the internet improves, Final Fantasy 11 would be a great cloud-based client where you don't have to worry about installs and patches and what have you. You just give people the ability to access it and access the game. And Yoshi P's talked about that, but not with any kind of like time frame or hope. We do know that the team on 11 has been scaled down even further. It feels like it's just kind of in this maintenance mode. And so at the end of the day, would I love them to do something with this game? Yes. Will they? Honestly, that would be another tearful moment. If they ever went and did something and made that kind of announcement, yes. And hopefully they don't do that anytime soon, because I could use a little bit, I'm glad the 15 minutes of fame are wearing off.
How much do you think they'd have to add to the cost of 14 subscription to let you just lump 11 in?
I think they would actually gain subscribers, right? Like when you think about the 11,
so you think don't increase the price. You think do it just like WoW.
Just do it like WoW.
Just lumps in.
Right, because then essentially what you get is that when people are like, you know what, I'm taking a break from 14. Maybe you don't cancel your sub because you're like, I'm gonna go check out 11 for a little bit. I'm gonna go try that out. I don't think you can. Like if they did what I pay like for a dual subscription, yes, in a heartbeat. But that's because I've paid for a dual subscription, paying full price for both. So that would still save me money. I would still prefer that if they just gave me one subscription. That makes it easy. It just makes it like in the launcher. What game are you booting up? We've already got you logged in. Just make every barrier you can take away, because 11 has enough barriers as it is, but every barrier that you can take away, I think is a big win for, anybody who, like me, is a big Final Fantasy 11 fan and continues to always debate on returning, but then is always faced with the reality of like, well, I really don't have that kind of time right now. And so I usually end up playing 11 for, a month and a half once a year as just, and this is fun, to check out the game and see it, after all these years. But that's my answer. What do you think?
I would like to see them just not increase the sub. I think that's the better play long term. I think Classic was really good, because I think right now what would happen, I don't know how many people are subbed to 11, because right now I think there's a lot of people that play 14 that would try 11, but they're not willing to put any money towards that.
Right. And they're also going to experience
for free.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you're right, because I think the distance between, so 5.55 is, I thought it would be in December so that in Japanese Fan Fest they could reveal a trailer that had parts of 5.55 MSQ in it.
Right.
So I was wrong. I predicted December 5th, and they've said it's going to be mid-January. And so that's going to be after Japanese Fan Fest, which is January 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that makes the gap, according to the spreadsheet of Epic Nerdiness, that makes the gap between the 0.5 and the 0.55, depending on when that date falls, that theoretically could make 6.55 the longest gap for a half patch we've ever had.
Yeah.
Like we've never, I think the previous record's like 50 or 60 days, and this could be like 70 or 80 days. Which is a long time, because remember, the half patch is when you get the rest of the patch. That's when you get final stage of Relic. That's when you get anything that they don't want to lump into the main patch. The 0.55 patch is also what sets the 0.58 patch, which is usually 2 weeks later, which is when the odd numbered half patch plus 2 weeks is when we unlock the previous Savage tier. Mm-hmm. So the loot on 12S will unlock with 0.58.
Right.
In an expansion, and that will make your 12S to unlocked 12S the longest we've ever had, I think. And so, and that's something that encourages a lot of growth in the community. So my question is, like, what are we supposed to do during that time? So I do think we're going to run a lot of risk of longtime players needing some sort of break between 0.5 and the next expansion.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that is where this conversation, I don't think they're going to spin anything up this fast, but moving forward, right, in future expansions, we get to this point in 7.0, when we get to this point in 8.0,
yeah,
this would have been a really good time for 11 to be grouped into this up.
Yeah,
It's not going to happen. But
and
this would have passed.
And 11's not going to appeal.
This would have been a great time for 14 fans that want to continue supporting the game, but run out of things to do,
or just
gap
need
out
a breather.
And they want to take a break. It would have been a great chance for them to go mess around in 11. Unfortunately, I think it's more complicated than just that, because what I would also like to see with the sub is a combined launcher and a combined chat system, because what WoW does very well with classic versus retail is I can chat across both games because it's all powered by BattleNet. And so we need a square net that can just handle this. Because
that's what Play Online was trying to be. And then
14 just doesn't have it. I mean, you have like the Mog Station and the Lodestone and the launcher, and I feel like I get different information on each of them. And BattleNet's like, no, it's all the same. And if something's available in multiple places, it's all the same. Like my launcher tells me everything that the website tells me, and it feels really cohesive, and it feels like it does a really good job. And I don't feel like I have to navigate them differently. It feels like the same UI team has handled all of them. I don't know if that's true, but it at least feels like it, as opposed to Final Fantasy feels like that's 3 separate teams that are absolutely not allowed to call each other. Like, you will be fired if we find out that the Lodestone dev team has ever talked to the launcher team. And like it just feels cumbersome. And so I'd love to see a lot of that kind of get cleaned up, because I think as we invite all these new players in on Xbox and all that, knowing that all of our resources are really cohesive is going to be really helpful.
Yeah.